Hello and welcome back to another Unreal Engine video. Today we're going to be setting up a horror character as well as making an editable Crosshair. I'll show you how to completely be able to customize it. It's really nice, especially when you need to tweak the size. You don't have to go in the UI and change it manually every time. It's pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and discuss how my playlists are going to work, and if you want to not hear me yap about that, you can skip to this timestamp here. But if you want to go ahead and listen and hear about what type of tutorials I'll be releasing soon, then go ahead and stay tuned. Alright, so basically this is going to be a horror character playlist. It's going to be kind of the baseline for what the rest of the playlist will be. The way I'm hoping it will lay out is that this playlist will be a formative playlist for other ones, so it will kind of branch out into a tree. So first of all, you would finish this playlist here to get kind of a basic character and game settings and everything. And then what we'll do is branch out into different tutorial playlists. Like we might have one on phasmophobia mechanics and have a ghost hunter style game, or a lethal company style looter horror extraction game. We can branch off into there, but they will all be built off of this first tutorial, so you have a baseline so that your character will work with any of the tutorials in the future. So you can, mix and match. If you want a mechanic from Lethal Company, but you want a mechanic also from Phasmophobia, it won't interfere with any of the code with your character. That's kind of the idea. I thought it was a good idea. If there's any specific games you'd like me to make mechanics off of, I'm going to be doing horror ones for a bit, but, go ahead and shoot suggestions in the comments. So when it comes to this tutorial here, when we're setting up the custom UI for the Crosshair, it's editable in the character. And that makes things really simple, but since it's editable in the character, we can also I don't know why I said that like XQC, what? Since it's editable in the character, that means we can pair a UI up with it. And through the UI, so, in a settings menu or something, you can use a slider or whatever and click and change the crosshair picture. I'm not immediately thinking of making a video on that because that's kind of niche. I'm not sure if that's something that a bunch of people are looking for. I know it's a game mechanic, like Phasmophobia has that mechanic for sure. I love the ability to change the UI like that, but if that's something you're looking for, just hit me up in the comments with that, and I will make a video on it if it gets enough attention. Alright, so first of all, you're going to load into Unreal Engine and create a new project. So under here, under the Games tab, you're going to go ahead here, and you're going to choose the third person in the Unreal Project browser. I know we're starting by making a first-person character, but the first-person character model here isn't a full character, and on top of that, he's wielding a gun, so it's actually substantially easier to start with the third person. Go ahead and select that, and under the project name, let's name it something like My Horror Game, something along those lines. After you type in the name, we're going to go ahead and hit create here. Alright, so now that Unreal Engine has finished loading, we're going to go ahead and go down here to our content drawer, and we're going to go ahead and change our third person character to a first person. Where you're going to find your character is going to be in the third person folder here. Double click on that. Go ahead and open Blueprints. It's right here under BP underscore third person character. We're going to go ahead and right click it, and rename it. We're just going to go ahead and change out third. We're going to change that to first. Sorry if you saw my clip app going off there for a second. I'm not sure why it's even on. I'm going to have to turn that off. There we go. My game clipping app is off now, so when I hit right key, it shouldn't be going off like that. All right. So now we have our first person character, so go ahead and double click it and open it up. Alright, now we're here in the event graph. We need to go over to the viewport here. You'll go ahead and see that we have our camera here, and it's attached to a boom right here. And that just kind of keeps distance from the character in third person, and also when your character's camera hits a wall, it will push the camera forward into the boom. That's the purpose of it, but we don't really need it for first person, so click on the camera here on the top left, drag it onto the boom to unparent it, and then under the camera boom, right click it and just choose delete here. Now the camera should be on its own, but we need it attached to the head. So go ahead and drag it onto the mesh here and it will attach to the character. Looks like it hasn't done much, but that's because we need to choose a specific bone to attach it to. So click on the mesh here, and over here on the, oh, I'm sorry, not the mesh, we're gonna click on the follow camera here, and over here on the right you'll see sockets, parent socket. We need to click on this little glass to search for what bone we want, and we're gonna choose head. And then go ahead and click head. And you'll see it's actually connected to our head, but in the wrong area. So if you click on the follow camera here again, over here on transform, these little arrows here reset the value. So we're just gonna reset both rotation and location, and it should be on our character's head, but just in the wrong spot. So basically what we need to do is we need to change the blue value here. It should be what? The Z over here? Yeah. So we're gonna change that Z value and make it 90. We also need to change the X value. I think that one's gonna be negative 90. All right, so here at negative 90 on the X and 90 on the Z value, you can see it's still kind of in the wrong location. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to drag it forward into the eyes. Now, we do have these arrows here. I've just found when you drag along arrows, it's easier to do it without the grid snapping on. So it's snapping 10 points every single time we move it because of this up here. But if we turn that off, it's more precise, which is what we want. But when we do that, the animation pulls the camera. So instead what I like to do is we'll keep grid snapping on, but we'll use the sliders over here in the transform. So over here, we're just gonna go ahead and drag this X value. It will move it up. So we're gonna move the X value till it's about level with the eyes. Then over here on the Y value, just move it forward until it's just about touching the front eyes. So about right here. You can base it off of this white dot. That looks to be in the right location. So go ahead and compile and save up here in the top left. And now, when you play your character, you'll notice that you can't turn your head, and it's really weird. So what we're actually going to have to do is we're going to have to go over here and change it to where us moving the camera moves the player's head as well. So over here on the BP underscore first person character at the top here, we're going to click on it, and under the details panel, we're going to search for use controller rotation yaw. You can just say use controller, and you should say use controller rotation yaw, so click that. And the last thing we need to click is over here in the camera, and we actually need to search for use pawn control rotation. And we're going to take that as well, and compile and save. And that's actually all we need to do for the first person character setup in camera. So if you click play now, you'll see your character will follow. I mean, we've got to change the running because that's a little weird, but basically your character's camera will follow your mouse movements. So you can actually control your character now, and the animation doesn't leave weird head bobbing. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click here on the character movement component, which controls the character's movement and everything. Under the detail, we're going to search for max walk. I'm going to find our max walk speed. I'm just going to go ahead and click that and change it to 250, and then compile and save. And then now our character will have a nice little base walk. We can slow it down just a little bit if we want later, but right now this seems fine. And just like that, we actually have our character set up. We're going to go ahead and start on the UI element and making the custom crosshair. One last thing we're actually going to do, we're going to head over to our event graph here, and there should be a section down here for jump input. Now, it depends on what horror game you're looking for, but this can be easily added again. And I think most horror game tutorials I'm going to be doing, there is no jumping. I think games like, more goofy games like Lethal Company, yes, you can jump, but when it comes to a lot of horror games, they're mostly just walking. So maybe vaulting, but not really jumping. So we can go ahead and highlight this whole thing and then just go ahead and delete it so that our character can't jump, and just compile and save that for now. Now also what we need to do in our event graph here is we need to make some variables that can be edited in the character that will change our crosshair. So over here on variables in the bottom left, there's a plus for us to add a new one. Go ahead and click that, and it'll automatically let us name it. We're just going to start off with crosshair style, and which will just be the image that changes. So right here, if you click on Boolean, it'll actually change the type of variable. So click on it and type texture 2D, and we're going to see texture 2D right here. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it and choose object reference. We're going to make another variable, and this one's going to be crosshair size. ahead and click on this, and we're just going to change it right here at the top to a float, which is a number value. Go ahead and compile and save that. Go ahead and click on our crosshair style right here. And on the top right on the details, we're just going to go ahead and choose instance editable, which means this variable can be edited on our character outside of the blueprint. We're also going to go to the category here under default, highlight it and just type UI and press enter, and that will create a nice little category down here for our UI. And we can actually click on our crosshair size and drag that right here into UI, and we'll do that as well. And under here, under crosshair size, let's just make it a default value of something like 10. We're also going to make it instance editable, so go ahead and compile and save. Now, just to go a little bit further into what instance editable means, I'll just have to show you because it's better to just demonstrate. I said it could be edited on the character, but it actually can be edited straight in the game. So like, for example, we have a spawn point right here, but some people prefer to actually go under your content drawer, click and drag on your character and pull it out here and spawn off of your own character. So I'm going to show you here, if you click on your character, on the bottom right under the details, if you scroll down, we're actually going to find that folder for UI that we created. And here's the crosshair style, which lets us choose a picture, and the crosshair size. So basically, right out of here, we can change the character's crosshair style. So that is really nice, because when you want to start implementing your own crosshairs, then you can just do it straight from here, and we'll calculate the math in our programming so that you don't have to change the position too. It'll base it completely off its size and center it automatically. So it lets you implement your own crosshairs super easily and test them and get a correct size, as well as it makes it easier to make a little menu to edit your crosshair. Now what we're going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this character here and then go back to our content drawer. Right over here under content, if we actually see our third person character, we're going to go ahead and create some new folders just to make it a little bit more organized for future projects, because when you add a bunch of code, you wish that you organized it early on. So right here, we're going to create a new folder by right-clicking and choose New Folder, and we're just going to name it Assets. Now, in any project I do, I always have an assets folder. It makes it so much easier. So assets will be things like 3D models, textures, sounds, whatever that you're implementing as not like a physical thing into your level, but it's a very broad and generic term, so that you can go ahead and click in here and add a new folder for stuff like, I don't know, if you want to add static mesh. Now you have one place where all your static mesh can be, and it makes it so much easier. I'm going to delete that though. And we're going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we're just going to name it UI. So this is going to have our blueprints and everything for our UI. So we're going to go ahead and click and open this, and we're just going to right click, and right here under user interface, we're going to see a widget blueprint. Go ahead and click on the widget blueprint, and you're going to click here on user widget. It'll let us name it. We're going to say WB for widget blueprint underscore, and let's just name it UI. All right, go ahead and double click and open this UI. Now that it's opened, we're over here in the designer tab. So there's two different tabs to UI. You have a designer and a graph. A graph actually lets you physically attach code to it, but a designer lets you create the UI. So first of all, we need a canvas panel. So up here at the top under the palette, we can search for canvas. And a canvas is just a base panel that you can insert other things into it, but we'll get into this later. It also lets you adjust an asset like an image. It lets you change its size, scale, and also do something called anchoring it, which keeps it on a certain position. And I'll actually show that right now, because we also need to search for an image. Now these are the only two things we actually need in our UI for the code to work. So drag this over into your canvas panel. Now what we need to do, let's go ahead and make sure when we click on our image it says is variable here at the top. So let's change the name to img for image, and let's just name it Crosshair. So now that we have our crosshair here, we can see that since it is attached to our canvas slot, over here it says slot for a canvas panel slot, so our canvas panel is allowing us to move this and scale it. But normally we wouldn't be able to. So over here under anchors, we're going to anchor it to the middle of the screen. So this anchor is going to move here, and that means that the position is based off of the anchor. So if we go ahead and hit these arrows like earlier, we're going to reset our X and Y, and you will see by default it is going to position itself in the middle of the screen. Now, to basically test it out, let's go ahead and change the size X also to 30. And we'll just leave these values like this. It can be off center because, like I said, the math is going to automatically move it, but it just makes things substantially easier doing it this way. You're also going to go ahead up here and you're going to compile and save. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is that I'm going to create a Google Drive for every single horror project. So that way, if you need to grab assets from different ones, you can and just use them. So in the description, there should be a link to a Google Drive that should combine all these different ones. And just find the series that you are watching. And then under the series, there should be a specific folder that has, you know, the crosshairs and everything in it. I'll leave probably like a dot and a crosshair to start off, but you can look up and also create in Photoshop really easily your own crosshairs. So just go ahead in that drive and download the crosshairs I've listed because it's the one I'm going to be using this video, or you can go online and find your own and use them. Just absolutely make sure the crosshair is completely centered in the middle of the image and the background is transparent, or else it will get really fugly and we don't want that. And just also make sure that you drag and drop the image into this UI folder right here. Alright, so I went ahead and imported it. You can just drag and drop it straight from your folder on your computer, and it'll actually drop it in here as a texture. So I chose the cross because that's just one I'd like to start off with. And what we'll do is we'll go back here into our WB_UI, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go and click on this image_crosshair. And basically the way you change what texture it is under the brush here. So clicking the brush under image here, let's go ahead and choose our crosshair just to see kind of what it looks like. Alright, cool. So it's going to center itself in the middle of the screen here, and like I said, right now, as long as we just leave it here and it's anchored and everything is correct as I've shown you, we'll be fine. But just to demonstrate that the code is working, I'm going to go ahead over here to this back arrow and actually reset and make sure there's no image. I want to make sure to show you that the code works, because if we have the crosshair set here, then even if the crosshair doesn't link properly, it will still be a crosshair, whereas it'll show up as a white box if it's wrong. So I'd rather there be a point you can see where it could be incorrect. And speaking of troubleshooting, we actually have to go into our first-person character and we have to set up the UI to actually show up. Go ahead over here and click on your first-person character, and we should be here in our event graph. So first of all, let's find some space. I like this little section in the bottom here, so let's go down here. Go ahead and right-click, and we're going to do Event Begin Play, which means the code on your character right here will go ahead and start playing the second that the game begins. So let's go ahead and move it down here. I forgot that Unreal Engine by default already has Event Begin Play selected, so you can just use this Event Begin Play because it's using it for your input mapping, so we don't want to mess with that. So let's go ahead and drag out the Event Begin Play here and make some room, because we're going to right click and we're going to look for a sequence. Now a sequence means that things are going to play in order, so we can still technically use this. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hold Control and then click and drag this to move it to this pin here, and then under then 0, move it right here. Also, if you're very OCD like I am, if you select 2 nodes, it will actually level them if you press Q. So choosing the sequence in the Event Begin Play, I press Q and it'll make it perfectly level. It's very satisfying. So basically now what we have is Event Begin Play. First this line will play, and then after this line is finished, this next line will play. And what we're going to do here is we're going to drag off of then 1 and we're going to do Create Widget. Now we're going to create a widget. So under the class, we're going to type UI, and it should only pull up our WB UI. So we're going to go ahead and create the UI, and under return value, we're going to do, dragging it off, promote to variable, and we're going to go ahead and name it WB_UI. It will show up as a variable down here, and we're going to move it and drag it into the UI folder. We're also going to go ahead and with it selected on the right, we're going to choose private. So basically what we just did is we created a variable so we can reference this UI wherever we want without having to drag off a pin. So basically it's going to save the fact we are using this specific UI as our main UI. It makes it extremely easy if you want to edit it or even remove it, so it's a good rule of thumb to set it. Now after the pin here, we're actually going to choose Add to Viewport. And that's it. Like I said, with this selected, you can select this and do Q. It'll level it, compile, and save. If we play our game, you should now see that white dot popping up we were talking about. So go ahead and escape out of this. And that's really just how you set up the UI for your character. That's all you really have to do. And now through here, we can reference our UI wherever we want. And with it private, it stays only searchable in our character so that if we're accessing other blueprints, it doesn't become a whole mess. Again, this is all to organize. So what we can do is go back to our WB_UI up here. We're going to go ahead over to the graph here, and we're actually going to set up the code that we need. What we need to do is we can delete everything here except for event construct. So event construct is kind of the same as the event begin play. The code runs when the UI is created, and in that case it'd be when it's created at the beginning of the game for our character. So again, we're going to drag off of here, and we're just going to create a sequence because we need to run two different types of code. First of all, whenever it's created, we need to find the character and find these values we have right here. So crosshair style, crosshair size. So that will, off of the character, let us influence here what our crosshair looks like. So first off of then one, we need to drag off of here and do cast to BP_first person character, or whatever you named it. And basically, to cast correctly, you need a reference off of the object here. So off of the object, we can actually just do get player character. Now, if you're doing a multiplayer game, it can get a bit finicky doing get player character since there are multiple player characters, so you need a specific one. But since it's single player for now, there's only one character to pull from, so it makes this casting extremely easy. But later in the series, if we ever have one that will implement multiplayer, then I will change this. Now what we need to do is actually grab those values. So we're going to drag off of here. And we're going to type crosshair style, get crosshair style. We're also going to drag off again and do get crosshair size. Now with these two here, we'll just line them up. And then what we need to do is set them as a variable again. So drag off of here and do promote to variable. We can keep the exact same name, just press enter. Go ahead and connect it up here, and we're going to do the exact same thing to the green one here. So drag off, promote to variable, enter and keep the name. We're going to go ahead and connect that up. That's doing exactly what our first person character did. It's saving these into this blueprint so we can access them whenever we want. So let's organize this a bit. Another way to keep these lines from being all ugly, you can click a point like right here, double click on the line, it'll create a dot. And with this dot selected, if you select whatever it's connected to and press Q, it'll level it out, and I think it looks pretty nice. This is how I organize all of my code. Like I said, I'm very OCD when it comes to that. Now what we need to do, now that we have this set, we can actually, at the beginning of the game, set what crosshair image it has based on which one we want selected. So we're going to click on image crosshair and drag it in here, press get, and then we're going to drag off of this and say set brush from texture. Go ahead and drag off of here and connect it. And basically now we need to select what texture we're going to use, so we can go ahead and drag off our crosshair style here and grab it and plug that in there. We're going to go ahead and match size there. Since it's supposed to match the image to the texture size, I don't know if this really influenced much in my code. This is just how I wrote it, and it turned out correct. So if it becomes a problem in the future, we'll change that. I doubt it will, but it seems to work perfectly just fine. So this is the first line of code done. So we're going to go back to our sequence, and after this completes, we're going to run our second line of code, and we're going to change the size of the image depending on what we want it to be in our character. So go ahead and get the image crosshair and drag it in again and do get. We can drag off of that, and we're going to slot as a canvas slot, which we were talking about earlier. And I'll explain once we write this out the reason for everything. So After this, we're going to do set size. We're going to go ahead and label that as well, and I'm just going to drag then one into this. Under in size here, we're going to right click on it and do split structure pin so we get two values. Then we're going to grab our crosshair size and drag it in, and we're going to plug it into both. After our set size here, we're going to go ahead and copy and paste our crosshair size again. So right here, drag off, and we're going to do a divide. So you can type the slash node or type divide and it will pull it up. We're going to divide by 2. Then after that, we're going to drag off this and we're going to type negate, so it will always make the number negative. Drag it into here. Then after this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this canvas slot that we slotted, drag off of here, and do set position. We're going to go ahead and connect these up. Split the structure pin here again. We're going to connect this green dot to both of them here. Just going to make sure it's a little organized. And those dots I told you that you could place earlier, we can actually do that again. So let me disconnect these real quick. Another thing you can do is disconnect everything, and it will allow you to connect it up the correct way. And we'll just drag it back here again, all the right pins. So let's go ahead and create some dots so that it isn't going straight through here. Double click this side and we can just drag it up here. And we're going to put it over our code since that looks a little bit nicer and it's a little bit easier to read. Create another dot and move it somewhere like over here. And again, you can just choose the other dot and press Q to level it. So now this should be the code completed. Let me do one last pass over. Yep, this looks right. So we're going to compile and save it here. So basically, I'm going to read out the reason we typed all this. So we're grabbing our crosshair and we're slotting it as a canvas slot. So by default, our crosshair here can't change its own values. It can change its values when it's in a canvas slot. So what we're doing is we're slotting this into a canvas slot that's allowing us to change its size and position. Whereas, I know what you're thinking is that we already slotted it into a canvas slot. Well, we need to slot it into a second one that's basically slotting into the other canvas slot. It's a weird explanation, but it's keeping it in the center of the screen this way. Any other way, and it would kind of float off. So this is the best and easiest way. I mean, it's just one pin here to slot it as a canvas slot. That's the best explanation I can give for that. It's canvases can get a little complicated. So basically now we're going to set the size of it. And of course our size of X and Y, since it's a square, it will just be our crosshair size. So now what we're doing is we're taking our crosshair size and dividing it by 2. The reason for that is if we go back into our designer here, the way to always center something when it's anchored in the middle is to take the size, divide it by 2, and make it negative. So for example, it would be -15 and -15, and it will perfectly stay in the center. So that's always true when it comes to this. Divide the size X and Y by 2 and negate it, and it will fit in the center. So that's what I did. I divided the crosshair size by 2, and then I negated it and set that as the position for both. Now with this compiled and saved, let's just do that again. We'll go ahead and click play here. And you'll see that our dot is showing up in the center there. So it's still a white box because we haven't set the image yet. So we'll go ahead into our first person character and do that. So under our UI here, just to test it, let's change our crosshair size to something like 100. And we'll go ahead and click play again, and you'll see that it's much bigger. So we know the size is working. Let's set it back to 10. Now let's go to our crosshair style. And you can actually just click on the image here, and you can just search for crosshair, and it should pull up our picture. There we go. You click on your picture there and compile and save. All right, so I actually remembered something kind of weird. So we went ahead and set our crosshair style here to the cross and our size to something like 20. However, it doesn't show up when you play it. So the reason for that being, if we go back in our UI, we actually have to select our crosshair and change it to a really low value. So for whatever reason, if you set, let's say here in the editor, your size to 30, but we want to change it to a size lower than 30 off of our character, it will go invisible. Unsure why. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to check 1 for both of that, or you can do 0. I personally am just going to do 1 because I'm never going to have a crosshair at size 1. So At 1, we're going to compile and save, and when we press play with our crosshair size at 20, we're going to go ahead and see that it doesn't really show up properly. That being because we have to actually change the size to make it visible. So, especially in our editor here with the window up, it's still technically there. It's just so small that it's not rendering correctly. The lines become so thin, so let's just up it until we see it. So something like 30. Nope. 40. Nope. Right, so about 50 it starts to show up. So right here at about 50 it starts to show up, and it looks a little transparent just because the lines are so thin, and especially when it's not its own standalone game, Unreal Engine has a really hard time rendering small crosshairs in the editor. Like, for example, I remember working with other crosshairs, if you had a circle really small, it would turn into a square just because it could not render a crosshair in the UI that small correctly. So we'll start here with this. If that looks fine to you, we can keep it, but I'm going to change it to something like 55 and just see if it looks a little better. Yes, so 55, I think I'm going to keep it here. I'm liking how this looks. Just know it will look a little better in its own standalone game. It just, the viewport window has a really hard time rendering crosshairs if they become really small. It should still render some of the lines, even if they're tiny, but sometimes it will just completely give up on you on it. Alright, so that's the end of our tutorial here for this. We created the character, set them up, did the walking speed, got rid of jumping. On top of that, created a UI that, based off of code, could change itself from the player character. Like I said, it is easy to set up a pause menu off of this, where you can have a slider to change the size, as well as, you know, an image selection. But like I said, that seems niche. I've seen it in Phasmophobia, but if that's something you would like to see, just comment it below, and I will see based on the reaction if that's something that people are wanting. However, that's the end of this first video. Based off of our size and style, we went ahead and were able, from the player character, to change it. And like I showed earlier, if we drag in the player character, let me open him up. Under UI, it's right here. We are able to change these values from the player character as well in order to kind of mess with and play with our crosshairs. It is super useful if you're making your own crosshairs to do this and just, you know, see how it plays out in the editor. But that's the end of this first video here of our series of creating a horror character. After this series is completed, we're going to go ahead and branch off into some other playlists, such as, you know, like a ghost hunting game. You know, we could have kind of a Dead by Daylight style one, maybe, where I can explore how to do the perks the same way the game did. Just really suggest below what game you would be excited to see its mechanics explored more, because I know that people on YouTube will really just throw out random mechanics, but I love diving into a specific game, picking apart all the mechanics that make it work so that you can better understand how it's done. It lets you implement these mechanics into your own game, as well as come up with some new ones and have better ideas on how they might work. With that said, I hope you don't stay up too late, and I'll see you in the next one.